I'm Barbara Peters. Welcome to another episode of the Criminal Calendar. I have a special treat today, and for that I am specially dressed. I am wearing a Jack Reacher Lee Child t-shirt, and this logo that you see here is...
It's the official shield of the military police from the U.S. Army.
And that's because Jack Reacher, your guy,
is an ex-military policeman, yeah.
What a concept. How clever of you. Our guest today is Lee Child, who is the author of the Jack Reacher thrillers, among my all-time favorite books, and in fact these are my personal books lurking on the table. And the reason, for those of you who read them, that they may not look like your personal books is that all of them except Killing Floor are the British edition. And I guess that's because you're a Brit.
It is. I'm a... why you collect the British versions has nothing to do with the fact that I'm a Brit, but I am a Brit, yeah.
Well, no, it has more to do with the fact that your British publisher publishes your books ahead of your American publisher.
Yeah, although that shouldn't happen, actually. You know, that's a little-known secret, that my contract always stated that the American book should be the first edition.
Right.
And it was for Killing Floor. Killing Floor, 1997. The U.S. was the first. But then Penguin and Putnam merged, and I got pushed back in the shuffle from March to June, and the British publisher wanted to stick with April. So April became the world first edition. So by accident, really, yeah, the British ones are the true firsts.
But it's exciting for you because I know with your new book, Without Fail, you were over in England in April and you soared right up on the Sunday Times bestseller list.
It was fantastic, yeah. I mean, as you say, I was there on tour, and after a few days' appearances, there was a launch party. And I knew that the launch party was on the day that the list comes out, you know, because in the trade the list always comes out early. So this was a Tuesday night, I think, and I knew the list would be out. And nobody was saying a word to me. So I thought, oh no, you know, it didn't work. It hasn't made it. Nobody said a word, and then like 2/3 of the way through the party, somebody tapped on a glass, big announcement. It had gone straight in at number 3. And I felt pretty good at that, but then being an author, and I know you've talked to hundreds of authors and you know what we're like, I thought, well, number 3 is great, but it's gonna disappear next week. Next week it's gonna be gone. So, all right, you know, 1 week at number 3 is pretty good. And then later in the week I had a dream that it had actually fallen to number 12, which is kind of embarrassing, you know. To fall out of the top 10 after 1 week is terrible. So I was kind of miserable. I told my agent that I had this dream that it's fallen to number 12. And he said, no, you misinterpreted the dream. It's risen to either number 1 or number 2. And I thought that, you know, he was just being an agent. But sure enough, the next week the list came out and it was up at number 2. So I had a great time in Britain. I really did.
I can imagine that. What does making the top of the list mean, aside from, you know, the general kudos and whatever? How does it translate financially?
Financially, it's hard to say there's a huge difference between being number 1 and number 4, let's say, except that they take you more seriously. You know, it's something they can look at and say, okay, yeah, we need this guy for another 4 books or whatever. And of course, if you're number 1 somewhere, then you get foreign deals off the back of it. So it does make a lot of difference.
And
really.
you tend to get better placement in stores and, you know, more review attention, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, stores like yours will always choose what they like and what is good in their opinion, but mass market stores have nothing to go on other than somebody else's list. And so if you're number 1 on the list, you're up front and center in the store, which then generates more sales. You know, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, essentially.
It really is. I remember a couple years ago, John Sanford was signing for us on the night that the New York Times list came out, you know, our version of your London Times list, and he was just so choked, you know, with excitement because he had done well over the years, but this was his first time at the number 1 slot.
Well, it is, you know, if you're in anything where there is a league table, whatever it is, you know, baseball, whatever, you want to be at the top of the league table. But it is actually, it's a tough thing because, you know, let's say you do, like John Sanford, happily made it to the top of the list. Where does he go now? I mean, he's got to say, all right, I was at the top for 2 weeks, now I want to be number 1 for 4 weeks, and then 6 weeks. And unless you're number 1 for 52 weeks of the year in every country on earth, there's always something else to aim for. So
it's interesting. It probably reverses the pressure. While you're not at number 1, you know, you're sort of being driven to try to get to the top, and then when you're up there, the pressure reverses and the object is to stay.
It is. And it's comforting in a way, though, because there are 52 weeks in the year, and so there's plenty of room for everybody, which is kind of the the upside of it. That,
Well,
you know, if John Sanford is there at #1, that's fine, because I'm thinking, okay, well, he's not going to be there all year. You know, I'll be there part of the year.
well, I think it's fun because I remember the first time you and I ever had a conversation. You were one of the few authors who's ever been fairly direct about why you got into the authorial game. Many people like to give it a real literary spin, you know, and they talk about I always wanted to write since I was 6, or, you know, I see myself as, you know, the new James Joyce or whatever it all is. You were really very candid. You said, you know, you wanted to make a commercial success. You'd been downsized from your job in television, and you needed to make money.
I needed to. That's the key word, needed. And so, yeah, for me, there was no pretense about it. I didn't want to be James Joyce. I would be horrified if I became literary. If I won the respect of literary magazines and was selling 3,000 copies, I would be, you know, that's no good to me. What I want is to be ignored by the literary magazines and sell 300,000 copies, because this is a business, you know, it's a living for people, and you've got to take that seriously.
Well, you do. However, I printed out a couple of things because I didn't think that my perhaps faltering memory was going to get me through that just on a straight quote. But there are certainly authors who are good at the commercial side of it, and one of them is, if I can ever find this piece, is James Patterson, who trained, you know, in advertising, was a big advertising honcho. And I kind of enjoyed, this is a review from Publishers Weekly of his new book just out called The Beach House. And I say in part, I quote in part, "Unlike some of Patterson's standalones, this new book doesn't move Patterson into new territory. Smooth as a vanilla milkshake and no more sophisticated. Written in 113 short chapters that won't tax anyone's attention span. This is smart, market-savvy, populist entertainment. Patterson might as well have called this one the beach novel, because it's the book the hardcover people will be reading at the Hamptons and elsewhere this summer." And then I added, having visited his website and seen some of the marketing stuff, that this whole marketing campaign for the Beach House is actually hooked up directly to Crystal Light, 2 flavors, neither vanilla. And I thought that's really taking it to an extreme. Jim won an Edgar for Best First Novel for his very first book, and as I understand it, he was something of a critical success for 2 or 3 books, but he wasn't selling all that well, so he decided he was going to go, you know, straight for the commercial deal, and this is the result. Your first book, Killing Floor, I know you wrote it to be a commercial success, but you ended up winning the Anthony Award, which is, you know, for Best First Novel. And I recall saying to you at that very convention when you won it that you were going to be a critical success and a commercial success in spite of yourself. And I do think that you do write your books, even if they have a commercial spin, you still write them to be the best books that they can be.
Well, sure, and I think to do the opposite is a disaster. If you consciously try and write down or aim low because you think that's where the market is, I think that will always be a disaster. I think you've got to do absolutely the best you can do, and that's certainly what I do. I try and make them the very best book that I can. I'm just very fortunate in that I'm a thoroughly middle-brow, ordinary person, so that what I like is what everybody else likes. And so, you know, that's just a piece of good fortune, really. I don't have to aim anywhere other than what I want to do.
Well, I know you had, and we'll go back to that in a minute, I know you had a long apprentice in television writing, which undoubtedly, you know, made things better. But I also ran across this month when I was writing our store newsletter, a book by Al Zuckerman, who is a very powerful agent. He's been Ken Follett's agent forever, and he does Ridley Pearson, whom I think you know, and a bunch of other fairly important thriller writers. And he is sharing his idea of what it takes to write the blockbuster novel.